Hello and welcome to Season 2, which is intro part 2 of our new series, Safety for Cruisers. My name is Eitan and we are here in beautiful Las Hadas, Mexico on Sierra Wind. So basically what this is going to be is a walkthrough of the boat as I have it set up with an emphasis on the safety items that I have on board. This will be one of many disclaimers I'll throw out. This is not the only good way, it's not necessarily even the best way to set a boat up for cruising, but it's the way that I have it set up and it works very well for us. So we're up here on the bow. First couple of big ticket items we have is our ditch bag and our life raft. The life raft is a Revere 6-man or woman Oceans model. It's a canister mount with a hydrostatic release. So what that means is that it is held in a cradle that's bolted to the deck with a pressurized release system that will sense when the canister goes underwater and will deploy it automatically if the boat sinks without anybody touching anything. There are a couple of different options for release mechanisms and rafts and everything. We'll go into that at a later point, but this is how I have it set up. Due to our limited deck space, we decided to go ahead and just stow the life raft with stow the ditch bag with the raft itself. There are some people that will stow it separately. It works well for us to keep them together, and we actually also, as you can see, have the bag tethered to the canister of the raft, so it will float free and deploy with the life raft. And since the plastic canister remains with the raft and is just held underneath, then we'll have our bag with the raft if it so deploys by itself. We'll go into the ditch bag itself separately, again in a later video, but these are obviously two of the really big items. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't think any boat has the right to be offshore if you don't have a good life raft and a ditch bag on board. So, moving aft, we have our emergency potable drinking water. We have a water maker on board, but regardless of what your primary system is, it's always good to have backups. So we have 15 gallons of potable water on the boat. In case something happens, we could survive quite a while on that supply there. On the opposite side, we have our 3 jerry cans full of diesel. So again, we always run our fuel calculations, make sure that we've got enough for our trips that we're doing, but it's good to always have your backups. So moving forward, this lateral companionway here, this is where we'd have our jack lines set up, and we run them through these stanchions here. Through the standing rigging and the chain plates. We'll go into that again at a later point. But as we move back here, we'll get to the aft deck. One of the nice things about a center cockpit is you get a bit of space to hang out in the back here. So on the back, we have a couple of, again, bigger ticket items. This is our life sling here. So life sling is going to be one of the primary recovery methods we utilize for man overboard situations. Really important note, again, we'll have a separate video on man overboard scenarios, but really important note is that the life sling has to be attached to a structural point on the vessel. If you toss somebody a life sling and the line runs out the bag and goes into the water, then it's great, they have a flotation device, but they aren't attached to the boat like you would have wanted them to be. We have just a kind of ratty old Type 4 throwable. That's not our primary throwable, but we have an extra one there. This fishing knife doubles as a emergency release for our dinghy, which is on Dyneema cord davits here. So if we needed to cut and run the dinghy here, which is another pretty big ticket safety item. Brand new nameplates. Francois is the name of our lovely little tender here. And Francois actually has his own ditch bag in him as well. It kind of doubles as a ditch bag and toolkit for the tender. But if you have a separate boat, whether it's a kayak or a rib or a 32-foot center console like the one I towed in the Bahamas, it's great to have a ditch bag in that as well. Moving right around here. Got our some spare life jackets that are stowed in this little life jacket bag here. These are just going to be our spare inflatables that we don't use, and also a couple of regular foam cord jackets. So these aren't our primaries, we'll see those down below. Moving right along here, one of the final items we have before we go inside Again, this is where we would run our jack lines along the side here. This is going to be our primary throwable flotation device. So this one is getting ready for an upgrade, but she served us pretty well so far. Have a nice bright water activated strobe on the throwable. That's super important. You know, depending on the vessel, depending on the size, there's a lot of different options, but a ring buoy or a horseshoe buoy is a really good primary throwable device to be used in conjunction with the life sling. Moving into the cockpit, one of the kind of less thought of safety options, but really important, is going to be your navigation and your chart plotter. So we have a fully networked B&G system. We've got the Zeus 9 in conjunction with the hydraulic autopilot. We have 3 Triton displays, and one of the amazing things that B&G does is they have a really stellar man overboard function programmed into all of their multifunction displays. So all you have to do is either hit 1 button or 2 depending on the setup that you're configured with, and all 3 of the displays plus your primary are going to switch into man overboard mode, and you're going to get really great navigation back to that point. It's going to save it, it's going to mark the time, so you've got a lot of really good resources built into your electronics package if you go with B&G. On the kind of, you know, B&G versus other things, I don't get paid by any of the companies to do these videos or for any other reason. I wish I did. So any recommendations or any choices that I've made on gear and equipment, brands, types, everything are going to be the result of my doing my own research and picking them out for suiting my needs. Certain other people are going to have other preferences. Other boats are going to have different setups that require different brands, different types. So take what I say as what it is, and if you can figure out how to get me paid for doing these, fantastic. A few other safety items coming in here. We've got our RAM mic. So have a Standard Horizon RAM 3 Plus up here. RAM mic is basically a remote control for your primary VHF radio. So some people will actually have 2, say if you have a fly bridge on a motor yacht or a larger sailboat, you might actually have 2 separate radios with 2 separate antennas and everything. We don't have the real estate for that, so we have a GX 1700 down below with a RAM mic in the cockpit. Super, super important. I see a lot of boats that just use a handheld in the cockpit. You have a fraction of the power. You don't necessarily have DSC, which is one of the big things we'll go into for your radio. So I think it's absolutely imperative to have a RAM mic or a separate VHF station for that. Another cool thing that I just added on the boat a few months ago is a horn. So most sailboats for some reason don't come equipped with a sound producing device, and so for your Coast Guard inspections or whatever your flag state is, you're going to rely on a little air horn or even a whistle. Those were great, except that they always sit in the nav station and just rust away and never get used. This horn is fantastic, not only as a safety signaling device, but also if you're in areas where you actually are using sound signals, or you're running, you know, when I used to charter this boat, you're required to use sound signals for certain parts of your trip and navigation. It's great to have just a little button. I mean, the whole thing costs less than $100, and it does a great job for what it's there for. One other thing to go into is backups are great. Overkill is underrated. These little cables here go to our backup wheel pilot. We actually have a triple redundant autopilot, but our kind of stage 2 is a backup. If our primary goes, is that we have a wheel pilot that slips right on here, and this is the connection for it. Moving on downstairs. Make our way into the salon here. Just gonna hit a couple of the kind of big ticket items. One of the things that's really important safety wise is knowing where everything is on your boat. So you need to know the location of all of your through hulls, all of your transducers, every weak point in the structure of the boat, and be equipped to and plan for those to fail. So I happen to know that even though my primary transducer is up in the V-berth, I actually have a couple of old depth transducers here under the galley sink that could potentially be a problem for me. So we have to know that. We have to be aware of where they are and plan for those failures. Few things in here. You always want to kind of have things organized and well kept on board. So we have our 2 safety cabinets over here. We're going to have some backup med gear, and under our table we're going to have all of our offshore gear. So that's where we store our jack lines when they're not in use. We have our drogues, have all of the things that aren't going to be necessarily stowed up on deck. A couple other things that we've kind of come into using since we've been having crew changeover and since we've been cruising is using some checklists. We've developed some great checklists, some emergency communication procedures, and we'll go over those in a separate video. Moving over to our nav station, one of the big things you want to have when you're at anchor is an anchor watch alarm. You want to make sure you know if you're dragging. You want to be able to see your track. Super important. That way you can sleep easy, you can rest easy, and if something moves, something goes wrong, then you've got a computer that's going to alert you. I love using the iPad for that. Some people use their chart plotter. Your preference. A few other things at the nav station. We have an inReach device, so this belongs to Amanda, and this is fantastic because you can use it for texting. Also, you can set up a tracking website so people can see where you are, and of course it does have the SOS function. What that does is that sends a network out within the inReach satellite network and allows you to be tracked and found in case of an emergency. Down below, not as easy to access, but we have our Iridium Go, which we would activate if we were going offshore and we didn't have phone data to download weather. It's great because you can text, email, downloads data, and of course, again, it does have an SOS function, so you can use it for that. We have it wired to an antenna that goes up the mast for additional speed and better connectivity, but the unit works great by itself. I've used it for lots of deliveries. It's a really great device. We have 2 handheld radios that you see down here charging. So one of them is going to be our handheld, it's the HX890, so that's going to be handheld maritime radio. Receives all the same channels that our base does, and it also has the built-in DSC for for GPS and emergency functionality, so that's a pretty good device. And the other one is an aircraft radio. I have that because I'm actually a private pilot in the States, but a lot of more safety conscientious people are going to just buy a aircraft radio and have that in their either in their dish bag or on their primary in their primary navigational area, so that if something happens, they do have the ability to access those other channels. Some people use ham radios, just depending on your license and your skill level. It's a great option to have. Inside the nav station here, we have a couple of things. We have our leak kit, which we'll go into. We have our flare kit, and we have our manual bilge pump, plus a lot of books that I used once and haven't used in a long time. Moving up here, a couple of other things. We've got our PFDs. We'll go into that at a bit of a later date. So each of us have a nice high quality inflatable that we use with our tethers and everything else. Have our lovely old M710 here, ICOM SSB. Sits and collects dust most of the time, but SSB before satellite communication was the only way to be able to talk beyond VHF range without using smoke signals. So super amazing technology, and one that doesn't rely on satellites, which is great. Over here we have our iPad, which we use as our backup chart plotter. I use Navionics. I absolutely love Navionics. It networks into the B&G, which is a fantastic function that they've developed. And behind that, a little bit hard to see, we have our GX 1700. So that's our primary radar that we were talking about earlier, and that runs up to the RAM mic in the cockpit. Really important, breaker panel, everything electrical. That's a huge issue safety-wise. You want to make sure that your electrical system is dialed in, it's protected from surges. You've got circuit protection and everything, and that it's not messy and you got everything dialed in correctly there. A few other things. I love to have a flashlight right at the companionway. That way it's always there. You always keep new batteries in it. It's good to go if you ever need a light. This is one of 4 fire extinguishers that we have on board. We'll go into fire extinguishers on a separate video. And getting to the end of this, one of the big items that can sink a boat is a through hull. So every through hull should have a properly sized and selected bung attached to it. So we have one here. We also have a second smaller one that's in the back. You want to always exercise your through hauls. You want to be checking them regularly, and you want to make sure that if they fail, that you can immediately grab the bung, jam it in there. Here's fire extinguisher number 2. And the last thing to go, last two things to go into really quick is one, manual bilge pump. So we have a primary electric bilge pump. We have a secondary electric bilge pump, which is slightly above. We have a high water alarm above that. And then in case all else fails, we have a manual bilge pump with a handle that you can just sit there and work all day long. No matter how many electronic backups you have, it's always good to have your manual. And the last thing that we're going to look at really quick here is going to be our solenoid for the stove. One of the biggest killers and fastest ways to sink a boat or make it completely uninhabitable is fire. Great way to do that is to leave your propane either solenoid open or not have one. Might be tempting to think, oh, I'll just go back and close the bottle, but humans are lazy by nature. So if you just have a little switch that you flick up, and now the gas is on, you're good to go. When you're done with whatever you're using on the stove, go ahead and kill the gas by turning the solenoid off. That way you're burning off all the gas inside those lines, and it's just one more little increment of safety that you have to keep all of that gas and everything flammable outside in the back where it's not going to hurt anyone. Last big ticket item here, I know I've been saying last for a while, but I keep finding more things, is our EPIRB. So this is one of the single most important things you can do for improving your odds for safety at sea. This is a Global Fix V4, so this is a manual deployment obviously, but this is a new gen. It's a 406 megahertz and also 121.5 megahertz. It's a dual frequency, which is what most new EPIRBs are. And this is going to be able to get you found basically anywhere in the world. We'll do a whole big video on this, but you want to make sure your EPIRB is either in your ditch bag or mounted in a hydrostatic canister on deck, and if it's not one of those two, then it should be at the companionway, easily accessible, where you can all get to it. So a bit of a longer video this time, but this is how I have my boat set up, and we'll break it down, and you get to see a little bit more of each of these specialized things as we go on the series.